Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, May 12th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. It looks like a pleasant day in Riverside, with a high expected around 77 degrees Fahrenheit and a low dipping to about 60 degrees tonight. Coming up on the show, we are taking a closer look at former President Trump's latest proposal designed to tackle high drug prices. We will analyze why this new plan might succeed, where previous attempts fell short. Following that, we will investigate the Republican Party strategy for covering the costs associated with potential tax breaks under Mr. Trump. All that is coming your way right here on Alex's News. For our first story this morning, President Trump has revisited a controversial policy aimed at prescription drug prices. He officially signed an executive order yesterday, May 12th, implementing what's called a most favored nation pricing model for Medicare. Here to break down what this means is our news reporter, Ethan. Ethan, this sounds complex. What exactly is this most favored nation approach?
Well, Grace, according to reporting from the Associated Press via Yahoo News and Perplexity API, this executive order essentially mandates that the United States government, specifically Medicare, should pay no more for certain prescription drugs than the lowest price paid by other comparable developed nations. Think of it like getting the best deal offered internationally, but for medications.
So, it's like price matching on a global scale for the government? Which drugs are we talking about here?
Primarily, this targets drugs covered under Medicare Part B. As CBS News and reporting linked on Reddit from the Washington Post explain, these are typically medications administered in a doctor's office or hospital setting, like infusions or injections. This often includes very expensive treatments, such as those for cancer. CBS News also noted that HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has pointed to the high cost of drugs like Ozempic as a reason policies like this are being pursued. President Trump claims this could slash prices by 30 to 80%, potentially saving trillions, though CBS News adds the actual savings are still uncertain.
This feels familiar, Ethan. Didn't President Trump try something like this during his first term?
You have a good memory, Grace. Yes, as CBS News and the Washington Post piece highlighted, he did push for a similar model via executive order back in 2020. However, that attempt was ultimately blocked by federal courts.
Why did the courts block it back then?
The main issue, based on analysis from Perplexity API, was procedural. The courts found that the administration, specifically the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, didn't follow the proper steps required by the Administrative Procedure Act. That act requires things like adequate notice and public comment periods before making such a significant policy change. The Biden administration later formally withdrew that proposal in 2022, citing those court orders and concerns from various groups.
So if it failed before due to procedure, what makes the administration think this new order will succeed? Are there safeguards built in this time?
That's the key question. And analysis from Perplexity API suggests this new order, signed yesterday, May 12th, tries to address those past failures directly. While the full text isn't public yet, it's understood the order explicitly directs the Department of Health and Human Services to follow proper rulemaking procedures, including seeking public comment. It also appears to have a potentially narrower scope, focusing on those Part B drugs, which represented about $33 billion in spending back in 2021, according to Perplexity API. The administration also seems keen on incorporating stakeholder feedback and mitigating negative impacts, like effects on patient access or drug innovation, which were concerns raised previously.
It sounds like they're trying to prescribe a different outcome this time. But what's the reaction from the pharmaceutical industry? I imagine they aren't exactly thrilled.
You could say they find the policy hard to swallow, Grace. Predictably, there's strong opposition. CBS News and the Washington Post report that industry groups argue these price controls, effectively dictated by prices in foreign countries, will stifle innovation, reduce investment in crucial research and development, and could even lead to drug shortages or limit American access to new medicines.
Beyond the domestic reaction, could this have wider, perhaps global consequences?
That's another significant concern highlighted by analysis from Perplexity API. There's a risk that pharmaceutical companies might change how they launch new drugs globally. To avoid setting a low price in another country that the US could then adopt under this MFN rule, companies might delay or even skip launching new innovative medicines in those lower-priced countries altogether. Paradoxically, this could harm access in those nations and complicate the very mechanism the US wants to use. Some argue it might eventually force a global rebalancing of drug prices, but the immediate impact on access and innovation is a major point of uncertainty.
So the order is signed, but the real test regarding its legality and actual impact is still ahead as the details emerge and challenges likely mount.
Exactly. The order was signed yesterday, May 12th, as reported by Perplexity API and the Associated Press via Yahoo News, but the specific language designed to make it legally durable isn't public yet. We're now waiting to see the full details and anticipate the inevitable legal battles and the complex implementation process. The sources for this story include Perplexity API, the Associated Press via Yahoo News, CBS News, and the Washington Post via Reddit.
A complex issue with potentially huge implications for healthcare costs and the drug industry. Ethan, thanks for breaking that down for us.
You're welcome, Grace.
For our second story this morning, we turn to Capitol Hill, where House Republicans have rolled out a major budget proposal, and it's already causing quite a stir, particularly concerning healthcare. Joining us now to break it all down is our political reporter, Chloe. Chloe, this plan involves some significant changes, especially to Medicaid. What's the headline figure here?
Grace, the headline is definitely the scale. According to reporting from the Associated Press, carried by outlets like Yahoo News and the Press Democrat, House Republicans are aiming for at least $880 billion in savings over the next decade, and the primary target is indeed the Medicaid program.
$880 billion. That's a huge number. Why such deep cuts? And why Medicaid specifically?
Well, the House Energy and Commerce Committee is tasked with finding these savings. As reported by Yahoo News and local station KARC, this is largely framed as an effort to offset the cost of President Trump's proposed $4.5 trillion tax break package, part of his, quote, big, beautiful bill, end quote, agenda. Republicans argue, according to Yahoo News and the Press Democrat, that these measures are needed to root out, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse, end quote, and deliver promised tax relief.
So it sounds like they're trying to balance the books, but how are Democrats reacting to targeting Medicaid for these savings?
Fiercely, Grace. They're calling the proposal, quote, shameful, end quote. Citing early numbers from the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, which multiple sources, including Yahoo News, KARC, and the Press Democrat, have reported on, Democrats warn this could mean 8.6 million people losing health care coverage over 10 years. They see it as another attack on the Affordable Care Act, potentially leading to reduced access to care, especially for seniors, and maybe even hospital closures, as KARC and the Press Democrat note.
8.6 million potentially losing coverage is alarming. Can you detail some of the specific changes proposed for Medicaid? How would these savings be achieved?
Certainly. Yahoo News and KARC have outlined several key provisions. First, there are new, quote, community engagement requirements, end quote. This essentially means able-bodied adults without dependents would need to prove 80 hours per month of work, education, or community service to stay eligible. Second, states would have to verify eligibility twice a year, which could create administrative hurdles leading to people losing coverage even if they qualify. Third, they plan to end a 5% boost in federal Medicaid funding given to states during the pandemic. There are also restrictions on using federal funds for immigrants without proof of citizenship, and a freeze on the provider tax, which some states use to help fund their share of Medicaid costs.
That provider tax freeze sounds technical. What exactly is that?
Good question. A provider tax is basically a fee that states can levy on healthcare providers, like hospitals or nursing homes. The revenue generated from that tax can then be used by the state to draw down more federal matching funds for Medicaid. Freezing it limits that funding mechanism for states.
Got it. Are these cuts solely focused on healthcare, or are other areas affected?
Healthcare is the biggest piece, but not the only one. According to Yahoo News and CARC, the legislation also targets climate change initiatives from the Inflation Reduction Act. This includes pulling back funds for energy loans and investment programs, and trying to speed up permits for things like natural gas development and oil pipelines. The CBO estimates, reported by Yahoo News, suggest the whole package from the committee would cut the deficit by about $912 billion over 10 years, with at least $715 billion coming directly from the health-related changes.
What's the path forward for this bill? Is it likely to pass the House?
It's uncertain. KARC reports that House Speaker Mike Johnson wants the House to pass this by Memorial Day, which is just 14 days away now on May 26th. Hearings are scheduled. However, passage isn't a slam dunk even in the Republican-controlled House. As noted by Yahoo News, KRK, and the Press Democrat, some Republicans are hesitant about cutting these safety net programs.
And what about former President Trump? These cuts are meant to offset his tax plan, but where does he stand on cutting Medicaid specifically?
That's a crucial point of uncertainty. CARC and the Press Democrat reference reports that Trump previously promised not to cut Medicaid. Analysis we looked at via the Perplexity API confirms that while his administration often talked about efficiency in entitlement programs and proposed budget cuts, there's been no specific public statement from Trump endorsing these particular times $880 billion cuts since they were unveiled. This seems to contrast with earlier White House statements this year emphasizing his commitment to not cutting benefits. The analysis suggests this reflects both long-standing GOP goals and the immediate need to pay for the tax breaks.
So significant opposition, potential internal division, and an unclear stance from the former president whose agenda it's tied to. It sounds like this bill has quite the legislative mountain to climb before that Memorial Day target. Chloe, thank you for untangling that complex proposal for us.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In medical news, a significant head-to-head trial comparing two major obesity drugs found Eli Lilly's Zepbound superior to Novo Nordisk's Wegovy for weight loss. The study, known as SURMOUNT-5, showed participants on Zepbound lost an average of 20.2% of their body weight compared to 13.7% for those on Wegovy. Notably, nearly half of the Zepbound patients lost at least 20% of their body weight. Both drugs are GLP-1 receptor agonists, but Zepbound also targets the GIP receptor, potentially explaining its enhanced effectiveness. These findings, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, are expected to influence obesity treatment practices. In Argentina, the Supreme Court uncovered a major historical find in its basement, over 80 boxes containing Nazi documents and propaganda from World War II. Discovered during an archive relocation, the materials include membership cards, photos, and papers linked to Nazi activities and sympathizers attempting to spread ideology in Argentina, stored untouched for over 80 years, since a case opened in 1941. Supreme Court Chief Justice Horacio Rosati oversaw the initial opening, attended by Jewish community leaders and the director of the Buenos Aires Holocaust Museum. An expert group, collaborating with the museum, will now classify and study the materials, potentially offering new insights into Nazi networks and escape routes to South America. Turning to public health, a listeria outbreak linked to prepared foods from Fresh and Ready Foods LLC of California has sickened at least 10 people in California and Nevada, requiring hospitalization for all affected. The investigation, initially started last year, was reopened in April 2025 after the FDA found the outbreak strain in samples from the company's facility. Some patients encountered the contaminated food while hospitalized for other reasons. Fresh and Ready Foods has recalled products under its own name, as well as City Point Market Fresh Food to Go and Fresh Take Crave-Away brands, with use-by dates from April 22 to May 19, 2025. These were sold in Arizona, California, Nevada, and Washington. In Georgia, activists protesting the planned Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, dubbed Cop City, face uncertain futures following unprecedented racketeering charges. 61 individuals involved in the "Defend the Atlanta Forest" movement were indicted under the state's RICO statute in August 2023. Critics argue the charges against protesters who oppose the facility on environmental and police militarization grounds represent a severe overreach that chills First Amendment rights. The ongoing legal battle has left the activists' lives in limbo as the complex case unfolds. And in Washington, the Trump administration abruptly fired Shira Perlmutter, the Register of Copyrights, on Saturday, May 10, 2025. This came just 2 days after the dismissal of Librarian of Congress Carla Hayden, who had appointed Perlmutter. Both were notified via email with no public explanation. Perlmutter's firing occurred less than a day after the Copyright Office reportedly declined requests from Elon Musk seeking access to copyrighted materials for AI training. Her office had recently published a significant report on AI and copyright. Representative Joe Morell condemned the firing as an unprecedented overreach, potentially disrupting the copyright system and industries reliant on it. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.